Hello. Welcome to episode 2 of Den StrengthCast. My name is Sailor.
I'm Sean.
And we're going to hop right into things.
So, kicking things off, we just had test week just before Christmas, and this is our first, podcast back. Not a whole lot to talk about with it, but I would just like to say it went really well overall, kind of leaping off of where we kind of ended with our last one, I think. It was mostly about test week, right? But, not everybody had a great time, right? Because life happens to all of us, and some people, it just wasn't their time. But that's kind of like the thing about test week is you can do everything right, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be there on game day, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But just in comparison to a lot of previous test weeks, just rough ballparking it off the top of my head, I would say, that estimate of 4/5 that I think I had made last time was just about dead on. Previously I'd say maybe there's 2/3 of lifts that are made, but yeah, I think 4/5 or even 9/10. I don't know. I don't want to get too caught up on fractions, but we made a huge amount of of those 1 rep maxes, which is a really nice surprise because it's there's so much going into that test week, right? Between not only physically being prepared, but mentally getting under those weights a lot of times. Mm-hmm. But some people, some of the newer people, their percentages were going 70-pound PRs, and it was pretty crazy.
That's pretty nuts.
I mean, you can only expect that in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
But, yeah, I would say overall, anybody who, really stuck it out in that block really saw some good returns. And even people who didn't. There are people that were a little less consistent that still got their, 104%. So I was very happy with that. Yeah.
Yeah, do you think how much of that do you think is kind of helped by the flexible test week that we did? How many people took advantage of that, really?
Honestly, so part of the thinking there in putting that first optional deload in was that I didn't really think a lot of people would need it, but if I didn't deliberately put it in, people that did need it were going to skip it, right?
For sure.
And I think because of the way I had set it up, everybody just kind of fell into where they needed to be. I would say 2/3 of people came and squatted on Monday, right? They didn't need that day, but there were some people that are coming in off of travel, right? Or they just had done a bunch of shit over the weekend and were feeling a little bit beat up from that, right? And that's really all it was there for, was just in case, right? And I think that definitely had a part in how well things ended up going, because I wouldn't say that the people that did do squat on Wednesday and then deadlift again on Friday, I don't think that we really saw a negative decrement in performance from doing that. So, yeah, I'm happy.
Nice. Yeah, and I guess that kind of, with it being the new year, we can kind of segue into something that I wanted to talk about a bit, was just the, setting New Year's resolutions. It's that time of year. A lot of people are doing it. Because, I guess everybody should have kind of set them already, but some of us are a little late to the game, And just kind of coming in with some, I don't know, I would say that we had talked kind of on our own, and I had talked about wanting to count macros, and you had given me the advice to just, hey, maybe just start with some small lifestyle changes. And I kind of like that, and I thought about it, and I thought about the fact that I think a lot of people who come into doing New Year's stuff, resolutions, they kind of shoot super high, and I think that it would be, for myself, what I've done, and for other people, I think, is just setting kind of stepwise goals. It's a monthly goals that can kind of get that ball rolling, as opposed to jumping straight into it and being I'm gonna lift 6 days a week and sleep exactly 9 hours and run every morning. It's not going to happen.
It's too many things, people. That's too many things at once.
It's one, you'll get a week, maybe.
Yeah. Well, and it's really wild how often I'll get people who come in and they want all the things right now, right? I think, there are quite a few people that come in with more realistic ideas, or maybe it's just because I kind of lead them in that direction. But it's a really slippery slope, right? Where again, like you said, you can do it for a week, but there's so many things to juggle. There's so many new habits that burnout's going to happen really quick.
Yeah, I think that one of the great things about the New Year's is that you kind of, new year, new me, and you kind of come in and it breaks that chain of bad habits. I think oftentimes, like even myself, I get into this mind space of being like, well, I haven't done it in 4 weeks, so like why restart now, And I think there's like some psychology there in coming into the new year of it being this like acceptable time, like culturally, to be like, oh, start something, like get going, like you're good to reset, kind of reset that snowball, because I mean, good decisions snowball, but bad decisions snowball too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's any like real science behind the idea of that psychological reset, but it makes a lot of sense to me that like everybody's kind of in that mental space already, so it makes things that it kind of lowers that barrier. It's like an easier catalyst, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, in terms of like setting goals, if you do want to set those goals, if you're kind of that New Year's resolutioner person, just kind of like, I mean, and maybe this is what you mean by stepwise, maybe not, but just like doing just a little bit more of something, right? And then once you got a handle on that, doing a little bit more again, right? And it's very much that same concept for anyone who's been at the gym for an appreciable amount of time, is to like just add 5 pounds to the bar at a time, right?
Exactly.
And it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing that we learn in the gym, just applied to these other goals. And it's funny how many things that really can be applicable too, because it's just pushing you out of homeostasis enough that you can recover, figure it out, and then come back and do it again, right?
It's like the Ronnie Coleman. Everyone wants to lift these. Everyone wants to be a bodybuilder. Nobody wants to lift these heavy ass weights.
Right. And if you're a bodybuilder, you probably shouldn't lift those heavy ass weights, or you're gonna end up like Ronnie Coleman.
Yeah,
but
but the idea is we got to take these steps. So it's like you don't want to come in. I don't know. It's kind of like, I think like a poor New Year's resolution is like going, even for like a semi-experienced lifter, would be coming in and being like, I want to deadlift 405. And instead just be like, well, I want to work out and deadlift and make gains every week or every month or something like that.
Or like, every test week I want to go up 4%.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think that both of them can lead you to a 405 deadlift.
Well, yeah, that's exactly it, right?
But the second version feels like it's going to get you there with more success, right?
Well, there's like more padding, right? Like, if things don't go exactly correctly, it's less, you'll feel less defeated, right? Because it's just kind of like one step at a time.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. You're much less prone to, you kind of chase it till you end up hurting yourself or something, and that's never
right. Yeah, like starting to worry too much about the number and not enough about the actual stimulus you're creating with the number itself, right? Because we just make up these numbers; they don't really matter.
Exactly. Well, that's about all I had to kind of go over for New Year's.
Yeah, I'm not much of a New Year's resolution person, but I do like your point about that psychological period of time, right? And just like kind of reconsidering like how things have been going, have they been going as well as you'd like? Is there anything that maybe you want to change just a little bit, and it's not, instead of like, oh, I want to read a book every week for 52 weeks.
Yeah.
Because, second week, something comes up at work.
Exactly.
You forget the rest of your book, and then you're like, well, fuck it. Fuck that stupid resolution.
That's
I'm
a
not
lot
gonna...
Like for instance, a couple of my New Year's resolutions is just try to get to the gym like 3 times a week. And then try to, for the last week, I've kind of had 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. be like my creative hour. So I've spent it like writing or something. And then that kind of segues into bedtime routine and then getting to sleep at like a semi-reasonable time. I know some people are like 10:30, 11 going to bed. That's insane.
Dude. Like insane early or late?
Late.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that might change for you relatively soon.
Yeah,
but, yeah, it's funny because the thing that me and Roxy are focusing on, at least this month, is like changing the time we wake up and go to sleep to being 8 p.m. and 4 a.m. Which, it's so funny. I've tried for like 9 and 5, like wake up at 9, go to sleep at 9, wake up at 5. I mean, I've kind of had to wake up at 5 for many, many years at this point, between like just being in school and doing clinicals all the way up to now to, having the gym for 6 years, going on 6 years now. and having to do the morning classes, right? But like it's still it's really easy to go to sleep at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock and then start kind of that negative snowball you were talking about of like everything starting to fall off the wagon. But this 8 and 4 idea like gives me some more padding because like there was like these really hard like, oh, you have to be up at 5, so if you fuck it up at all, like you're fucked.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas if I'm like, if I hit the snooze a couple times when it's 4 a.m.,
it's all right.
Yeah, I feel better about it.
It's not as bad.
Yeah, and if I'm staying up a little extra late being naughty at 8:30 p.m., not so bad.
Not too bad.
I can still get to bed at 9 and feel like I was a little naughty.
Yeah. 8:30.
It's so crazy, but like for anybody who trained with Ella when she was here from, it was like last January. It was a year ago she started, and she came all the way through to the summer. She was doing those like 5 a.m. classes, so she had to have had to schedule something like that, which is, especially in your early 20s, mid 20s.
Yeah, that's insane.
Nuts.
There's no way.
When you got no kids, no other responsibilities. Granted, she's in the Air Force Reserves for National Guard, right?
Yeah, so some discipline there in
for
that
sure.
sense, but I mean, still, when I was Ella's age, I was not sleeping.
No, I would go to bed at 2.
Yeah.
My favorite time to work out was 8 p.m. because that's like in the middle of my day.
Yeah, and it was like a spiral. It was never like I'd go to bed at like 2 a.m. and then wake up cleanly. It was always like I'm borrowing from the night,
right?
And then still waking up at and well, not really going to class, but still waking up without 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which is like how?
Yeah,
what are you doing? Get it together.
Got to get back on that grind. Got to play those games.
There's something that's kind of like guided my sleep principles for like the last decade, and it's this adage of like an hour before midnight in bed is worth 2 after midnight or something like that. It's like an old farmer saying or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're going to bed at 10 p.m., it's like you got extra hours in the bank.
It does kind of feel like that, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I've just found that I've never really had an issue of like going to sleep once I'm actually laying down and like trying to go to sleep. And my wife Stephanie, she sits in bed and like scrolls on her phone and stuff and plays her games and things, and she always struggles to go to sleep at a reasonable time. I think that it's because you can like associate bed with not sleep, and then you won't go to sleep.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a real thing.
Yeah,
right.
And then whereas if you just go to bed to go to sleep, it becomes much easier to just like be like, okay,
that's a real
turn
thing.
my brain off and go to bed here.
That's why you're not supposed to like do work in bed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people even poo-poo on like reading in bed, which is like, maybe that's a little bit much, but
it depends what, right?
Yeah, like if you're reading for work, that's like, well, it's work.
Yeah, that's work. Or even just like Kindle, which I hate, but like I have like a night mode on my Kindle that I'll read from. I don't keep it in normal just for blue light reasons. But man, I used to bash Kindles and be like, never get a Kindle, but that's so fucking convenient.
They still are.
It's just like
I very much like print books, preferably.
Yeah,
it's just so much thinner.
I can lay on my back and read a Kindle for an extended period of time without feeling like I'm getting an arm workout. I read some hefty books, and you're like laying on my back. I'm like starting to shake. All right, what do we? Yeah, I suppose we can kind of segue forwards. I kind of touched on macros a little bit earlier. I think we wanted to talk a little bit about kind of macros a bit, and then kind of shifting into sort of maybe protein a little bit. So like an intro to macros, and then kind of that first macro of protein a little bit.
Right. And I think, talking about New Year's resolutions and things, that's probably something that's on people's minds is diet, nutrition. And, to that point, I'll say if you've never like really done a diet, like, again, work more on lifestyle stuff. Maybe just think about like quality of foods you're putting in your mouth, right? Or like, if you end up eating takeout a lot of the time throughout the week, maybe just try to like bring it back a few days. If you're like typically eating takeout 3 days a week, maybe just try to eat takeout 1 or 2 days a week, right? Really easy ways to start. But for those of us that are a little bit more advanced, maybe have some of that stuff under control a little bit more, this will be a little bit more pertinent, right? And it might also give you some guiding ideas on like maybe how you should be building meals if you are looking for that lifestyle change, right? Versus like, you know, you don't have to necessarily get so into the counting the macros or paying too much attention to that necessarily, right?
Some people do really well with if it fits your macros too.
For sure,
though.
for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, it's when I'm programming out nutrition for people, that's essentially all it ever is kind of if it fits your macros, right? Because that level of flexibility is good for a lot of reasons, but that's a whole other podcast we can do, right? But so just a brief overview on macronutrients. For those of us who aren't as familiar, there are 3 primary macronutrients that we look at, which is carbohydrate, fats, and proteins. And carbohydrates, fats, they're primarily more like energy sources, whereas protein is like what everything is made out of, right? They're like the building blocks, right? And I'll say it a lot in the gym, right? It's like, you know, you can't build a house without bricks. And like protein is ultimately the bricks for the house that we all live in our bodies, right? So if you're not getting adequate protein, like at a base level, and then you're also throwing in resistance training on top of that, it starts to create a lot of issues. I mean, I don't want to freak people out, right? Because it's not like it's super crazy or anything.
Yeah.
It's just going to be like you're sore for a really long time. You don't make gains as quickly as you should be. And sometimes like you just don't make gains, period.
Yeah.
And, like you get stuck way too early in the program when like just having more protein in your diet would really extend your lifespan and really like lift that ceiling you can hit, especially on that base program, right? That base program gets really intense by the end of it when we're looking at like finishing up those 3 deloads on squats, on deadlifts. And if you're not really on top of like especially protein at that point, you're just not recovering quickly enough from those heavy ass weights.
Coming in
day,
every week,
right?
setting PRs, you know,
or at least trying,
or at least
right?
trying, yeah.
So like you need a lot of food. So, to that point, like anybody who's starting a weightlifting routine, or like if you've started recently and you're finding that your energy isn't as high as it used to be, or you know, any of these ideas that like maybe you're not seeing progress as quickly as you want it to be, a lot of times comes back to protein. Because when we're looking at protein, really like so many people are under eating protein by a significant margin. The base recommendation for most people when it comes to like eating protein for someone who resistance trains casually, you know, 3, 4, or 5 times a week, we're looking at 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. So if you weigh 180 pounds, that's 180 grams of protein every day. And sometimes I talk to people and they're eating like 40 to 60 grams a day. And it's like, oh, fuck, we got a really big mismatch here, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want you to think like, oh, you know, if I've only been eating like 40 to 60 on average every day, I need to like, well, right. You know, that's not the case either, because you can't, like your body can take carbohydrate and break it down and make it into protein, but it's like a costly process, and it's not what your body wants to do. It's not what your body really needs if we're looking at performance or like continuing to push for these different goals, right? It's more like a survival mechanism, and that's not what we want to be leaning on. If you do like start to think about how much protein you're having in a day, and you started like, oh, you know, there's all these different tricks when you're thinking about like serving sizes and whatever, and like please don't quote me on these because this is just off the top of my head, but you know, it's like, oh, the size of your palm is like a serving of proteins, right? So like if you're having a chicken fillet or chicken breast that's the size of your palm, you can consider that a serving, and usually it's going to be like 20 to 30 grams of protein, right? And if you can get kind of like that palm sized serving 3 or 4 times a day, like you're really well set in the beginning, right? Because you don't really need all that protein, especially if you're not in a deficit, like a caloric deficit, you're not dieting down, but it does help a lot.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
So if you're kind of assessing what you've done with your diet and you're thinking about protein, like just kind of eat like you normally would, get a sense of like how much protein you might be eating in a day. Don't get too anal about the numbers because they don't really matter anyways. They're mostly made up. Right? You know, not every banana is exactly 36 fucking grams of carbohydrates. That's bullshit.
Yep.
But you know, when we're thinking about these things, you got to be really loose with it, because it's really easy to get too caught up in the numbers, and then you know, it's just again kind of going back to what we were starting with. Like it can make you insane to constantly be thinking about these numbers and like having to hit it exactly, right? Just have a rough estimate. You're gonna be thanking yourself for it, right?
Yeah, I think going in like I definitely get on the going insane side, like carrying around my phone, just like taking pictures of everything I'm eating, all the labels, everything. Like, especially when I would be working like factory jobs and stuff, where it's like I don't have the luxury of like, I mean, I could pack a lunch, but I'm also like a lazy individual, so like packing lunch is difficult. And so then it's like I'm like grabbing shit from the True, if it fits your macros. Like I'm grabbing a summer sausage sandwich from the vending machine, and like a bag of chips, and like a bag of beef jerky, because I'm like, gotta get my protein, and like taking pictures of everything and just like trying to get there. And I think well, actionably, one, I wish I would have just made lunch for myself. But like the big thing too is kind of like, I guess, just not too worry about like the numbers, and just kind of focus on making sure that you get some we talked about get some piece of like true protein in every meal. I think in the American diet, it's really easy to not eat protein at all in a meal. And I mean like true protein. Like it is hard to eat a meal without like literally any grams of protein, but it's like bread has protein, It is really easy to go eat just a meal of full fat and carbs and kind of just like walk away from that meal feeling satisfied, and then your body is like, what is this? And so just kind of get and you don't necessarily need to jump in and be like chicken breast, which is a ton of protein and really great, but like I've been on chicken thighs lately. I think they taste so much better.
Yeah,
and
don't feel like you gotta eat like a bodybuilder. Chicken and rice, it's fine for a sometimes meal.
Mm-hmm. But like, I mean, you're gonna get like just as much protein from chicken thighs, and it's gonna taste way fucking better. And yeah, and it's cheaper. You can get boneless chicken thighs for so cheap compared to chicken breast.
Win after win after win with these thighs.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
But in terms of like what are high quality protein sources, this is one of those things I usually bring up, which I think kind of freaks people out. But one thing I always think about is what's considered protein digestibility corrected amino acid scores, which is just to say like it's just to say that like not everything you see on a label is exactly what your body's going to be able to utilize, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're looking at something like a meat or like a soy protein, fish, poultry, red meats, these things are dairy. That's another easy one. Mm-hmm. They're going to be very close to like 100% in terms of like if you see it says 6 grams of protein per serving on the label, you can be very positive you're going to be getting about 6 grams of protein usable by your body to create new proteins and things within you. So like if you're looking at building muscle, or even if you're looking at like losing fat, these are important things. Right? Yeah. But if we're looking at something like like peanut butter. Yeah. Peanut butter is one that comes up a lot. When we look at peanuts, it's more like 50%, right? Yeah. So if you look at a teaspoon or a tablespoon of peanut butter, and it's, I don't know, it's like 4 grams of protein per tablespoon or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. That's actually 2, right? When it comes to how your body's utilizing it. And then on top of that, you got to be thinking about like what kind of carbohydrates, what kind of fats are coming with this protein source. So if we talk about something like a chicken thigh, right? There's a lot of protein and there's a little bit of fat, and that's fine, right? Don't be fat phobic. Fat's fine. You need to eat it. It's good for you. You need some level of it, or your body's gonna go to shit, right? Don't go low fat. Mm-hmm. But when we look at chicken breast, right, per serving, it's gonna have a lot more protein and a lot less fat. So if we're thinking like protein density, you can get a lot more out of it, especially if you're in like something like a deficit. Now, on the flip side, if we look at something like a peanut butter is going to have lots of carbs, lots of fats in comparison in ratio to the protein, right? So to get the same amount of protein that you would get from chicken breast out of peanut butter, you're going to have to be eating, like
exorbitant amounts,
10 servings, like which is going to be like 60 grams of fat, which is going to be like, I'm just making these numbers up, right? But that would be, 400 calories of just fat from peanut butter.
And if you're counting too, like you really, if you're being really strict about it, peanut butter's a dangerous one too, because it's like, speaking as somebody that enjoys peanut butter, It is really hard to measure your peanut butter without like weighing it. Like you weigh out like a serving of peanut butter, and
Don't
it's
you
like,
lick that spoon at the end?
it's like
Did you measure that?
That's not real. That's not a real amount of peanut butter. I can't make a sandwich with that. You know, it's like it is insane. And then a lot of people are like, I put a tablespoon of peanut butter, and it's like,
Did you even taste it?
Did you like really? Yeah. Well, or did you use the actual spoon and you actually put like a cup of peanut butter in something, because that spoon is not a tablespoon when it comes to peanut butter. You know, it is crazy. You can overshoot on these things, and for something like peanut butter, it's delicious, but it's like not worth it protein wise. I like to think that kind of like you are what you eat. When it comes to like quality of proteins, I mean, you can do it with a lot of things, but it's like I'd rather be made out of like salmon or beef than like Slim Jims or protein. You know, like, I mean, it just gets, it's a little bit easier when you're like looking at like a source, like a primary source of protein.
So these primary sources of protein, you know, like again, chicken, turkey, salmon, tuna. You could do sardines. You could do cuts of beef, pork, eggs, dairy. The big thing with things like eggs and dairy is they do come with a little bit more fat typically, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, it kind of depends on what your goals are. But
some people are too, like with eggs, like you can look at egg whites, not even as like a pasteurized thing, just as like, which we'll get into, but like as just like a regular, just kind of like taking out the yolks. And I think that that's like a really good tool for people who are like truly counting macros and they want to get like higher protein, especially when you're making things like you can make some bomb French toast with egg white and bread and cinnamon and like some stevia, and it's like super macro friendly and tastes delicious. But some people are allergic to like albumin. You know, so you can start to get like gut issues if you're eating like a lot of egg whites.
It's just the protein that's in egg whites is albumin.
Yeah, and so it's not all, so not all proteins are created equal in their general protein digestibility, and not all proteins are created equal for you as an individual. So kind of keep that in mind, and don't feel like you like, I have to eat guacamole and anchovies because this is the best sources of protein and fat that exists.
Yeah, everyone has their own body, right? You're going to be unique. Your mileage may vary with anybody's recommendations, and like anything that's like science related is all just based off of averages anyways. So like always take everything you hear with a grain of salt, try it out, experiment, see how it works for you, alter as needed, right? But the idea of the high quality protein, having some sort of high quality protein source, if you can get one of those in every meal, you're in a really good spot. And, you know, sometimes that's just, you know, if you typically have like a potato salad, just maybe throw in some shredded chicken, right? Yeah. Or, you know, some cubed soy chunks or however.
Yeah, whatever you can do, you know.
Or just, you know, eat slabs of deli meat on the side if you forgot to add it in.
I've been there.
Yeah.
been there.
Ham and cheese rolls-ups.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like segues into kind of the supplementation side of things too, because I've been there with the deli meat, but I've also been there like hitting up Quick Trip for like 40-gram muscle milks. You know, like it is, you know, these things like I'm a fan of like whey, so like milk-based protein drinks and scoops and whey protein, muscle milk drinks, all that stuff. I think is generally macro friendly, and the protein's like, okay, don't just don't eat like noodles and muscle milk. All right? It's not a diet, but it, you know, it's, I think a 40-gram muscle milk is like a super awesome supplementation. It has a ton of protein. So like the flavor might not be great for everybody kind of coming in, but like there's a 25-gram muscle milks too for like 25 grams of protein in a serving of a muscle milk. And I think God, there's so many things I want to talk about too, like just about like even like branding of things, like things that like brand themselves with having high protein that aren't really high protein. God. It's like real, like this is a big thing to watch out for. And like my wife Stephanie, she picked up some like granola packets, which absolutely delicious, tastes like Cocoa Puffs. The macros aren't actually that bad, super reasonable. You could fit it into a diet, but the only thing that's labeled on the box is 10 grams of protein. and it's like really trying to shove this 10 grams of protein in your face per pouch. And then you look on the back and it's got like 12 grams of fat and like 50 grams of carbs, and it's got more fat than protein in it. It's like the lowest macro in this thing. It's the protein.
Right.
So it's like, why are you advertising this as like a protein snack to me?
Right.
It's a great snack.
Right. That's it.
It's awesome. Those macros are fine, and it's great to toss it in as like an energy snack, you know. But like, it's not a protein source.
Right.
I'm not gonna eat 100 of these. I'm not gonna eat 10 of these in a day to get 100 grams of protein, you know. It's just not. And then even circling back to that protein digestibility corrected for amino acids, the protein that I'm going to be getting from like cocoa granola with some almonds is not equivalent to the protein that I'd be getting from something like fish or chicken or beef.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really big point, right? It's like, just because a food isn't a good protein source doesn't mean it's a bad food, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with that granola. That granola is probably great.
Yeah.
But, like, you just got to really watch for marketing, because that's a lot of what it is. And just take a peek at labels, right?
Mm-hmm.
But really, if you can stick to, like, that idea, I don't really like saying natural, because, you know, there's a lot we can say about natural, right? But if you can think of, like, you know, the least processed things, that's probably the things that are better for you in terms of being a main protein source.
Yeah.
With like things like soy being the exception, because you got to process that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, and you know, we talk a lot about meats, but there are non-meat options. Like soy is really good, and like
pea protein's good too.
Right.
Yeah. Pea protein's great.
That's kind of like segue into the next thing. You know, one of the first, maybe only supplement I ever suggest to anybody is getting a protein supplement, just because it makes this so much easier, right? Especially like, you know, you're going to go out with your friends, get a dinner. You don't want to fucking care about what kind of protein you're getting in this. You just want it to fucking taste good. You're going to spend a bunch of money at some restaurant. Get something that's fucking awesome. Don't just be worried about getting chicken on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So if you just have a scoop of whey protein, you don't even have to think about it, right? Because all of a sudden now you've added 20-25 grams of protein to that meal.
Mm-hmm.
So getting off that soapbox for a minute, just getting a good whey protein or pea protein supplement goes a really long way, because it just having one scoop gives you that 20-25 gram boost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, if you find that you're relatively short on protein, you could have two of those a day. And I think calling it a supplement really is kind of a disservice to it, because it's really closer to a whole food, right?
Yeah.
It's really just protein, kind of like just boiled down to that constituent part with the other things removed.
Yeah.
Like whey protein is like a byproduct of other
cheese,
things,
mostly.
right?
Whey, yeah.
So it's not like anything that was crazy processed to become this weird supplement. It's just like a natural part of cheese. That's it.
That's literally it.
So, yeah, I it's not something I usually tell people is like a hardcore supplement, right? It's really something that's close to the whole food and really easy to incorporate. The big thing to watch out with whey protein, or like really any protein supplement, is like, is it just a protein supplement, or are they adding a bunch of shit, which happens a lot? Because like, you know, depending on what you're getting, you might get a bunch of carbs with it, which you might not want. Depending on like if they're flavoring it a bunch, sometimes there's other things mixed in for like, you know, they optimized recovery or you know, whatever else. But just like get a basic ass whey protein. Like what I always suggest to people is the things I recommend personally. You know, there's a million things out there, and I'm never gonna have them all. I'm just basically at this point of my life gonna stick to the two that I love. But it's Optimum Nutrition is the brand that I like for whey protein, and they just call it the gold standard. And it's just whey protein, right? And it's like 20-25 grams, 24 or something like that per scoop. And it's like $1 or less per serving. So it's really affordable when you compare it to something like, you know, meats. So like if you are like on a tight budget and you need to get proteins in, and good quality meats aren't in that budget, whey protein is a fucking awesome option. Now, whey protein also isn't good for everybody, because like if you're someone who's got some level of lactose intolerance or something like that, or some milk protein problems, you might want to go with something like a pea protein, which is just as efficacious based on the studies that have been put out about it as whey protein is. It doesn't taste quite as good, doesn't mix quite as well, but it's ultimately the same thing if you're just looking for a supplement, right? And it's what I use. And the protein I use that's pea protein comes from a place called My Protein. It's very simple. All one word if you're putting it into a website. Just my protein. That's it. And they have like a pea protein isolate, and that's what I use.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think isolate is a protein isolate tends to be what I look for, because I want to specifically get something that doesn't have all those additives.
Right.
And it also kind of tends to usually have the most protein per serving. Looking at when you're picking out a protein, if you're not, I think recommendations that you just gave are great, and you cannot go wrong with those. But also looking at serving sizes of your protein that you're getting, because I've shopped around quite a bit, and there was a time that I had worked in nutrition too with like a ton of proteins, where we were bottling like sports nutrition stuff, and there are a lot of things out there that are like, you'll see and you'll be like, oh, this is like 40 grams of protein per serving. That's fantastic. And it's like 45-gram scoops per serving.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, oh my
Yeah,
God, that's insane.
And it's only got like 10 servings in a 5-pound jug or
and
something.
it costs $45.
Yeah.
It's like, holy smokes, this is nuts.
There's not a lot of regulation around supplements, or like
No.
hardly any, unless somebody gets reported for something.
It's like a food, so it's largely like the FDA, and then it's kind of it. SQF a little bit, Safe Quality Food. They're like a third party thing, but aside from those two organizations, like federally wise, there's not like a whole lot of oversight.
But as far as like the actionable takeaways here on proteins, right? You know, if it's not something you put a lot of thought or any thought into right now, just be thinking about like, what are you getting? What could you be adding? Take small steps toward it. Don't feel like you have to go throw everything out in your fridge and spend $300 on a bunch of new meat, because you're not going to know how to cook it all anyways. You got to learn all this shit, right? So just like one step at a time. And if you haven't paying attention to protein for a while, but like you didn't necessarily know how much you should be getting, that 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight will kind of hit everybody in that sweet spot, right?
Yeah. I think the 1 gram per body weight can't go wrong, but for some of my fellow hefty people, it gets a little difficult. So I actually tend to go with, like, if you want to try to do like a pound per like lean body weight.
Yeah, that's really how it should be done.
If you can kind of go in and get some sort of scan or estimate, a caliper method, something, figure out your percent body fat, and kind of add like a base hydration, figure out like a lean body weight. A pound per lean body weight is what I like to do. And then, or if you don't want to do that and you're a hefty person, like a pound per kilogram is kind of like a good correction as well.
A gram per kilogram?
Yeah, a gram. When I say a pound per kilogram, yeah, a gram per kilogram. My bad. Is kind of good too, and that kind of corrects it down quite a bit. But you're a little bit under where you probably should be, but also, you know, you're not necessarily a bodybuilder unless you are. In which case,
right on.
Eat more. Yeah. Hell yeah. But I got nothing more except one last shout out for pasteurized egg whites are fantastic.
This guy
them
and
all
his
the
pasteurizized
time.
egg whites. I walked into his apartment like 3 years ago, and he's got them on his table. It's like, yeah, I just drink them like water. I don't.
It's delicious.
What do you mean?
I actually would use Mio in my pasteurized egg whites, kind of add a little bit of flavor to them, in the morning. But it's great, like a cup, 20 grams of protein. They're pasteurized, so not gonna get sick. But like that's kind of why I brought up the albumin thing earlier. Though I don't have an albumin sensitivity or like an egg white protein sensitivity, so I can kind of do that easily. It is a pretty common allergy though, as far as gut allergies go. So caution.
Yeah, and you don't have to slug down uncooked egg whites. Like, that's not a thing you need to do.
Also, they come in a carton, so don't just like strain your own eggs. That's not what I was drinking.
Yeah, get those fats. You want to eat those yolks. But I guess like my last final closing point here is, don't do beans and rice. Beans and rice is not good protein. They say it's a complete protein. It gets all the essential amino acids. That's not wrong. But again, looking at that protein digestibility corrected amino acid scores, just a mouthful.
Mm-hmm.
It's bogus. And like the amount of carbs you get with it, and like the toots, if you're eating enough of them, doesn't make sense. Yeah. Just like if you don't want to eat meat, eat some soy. It's okay. It's all right.
Yeah, that's yeah. I got nothing more. The toots. True that. All right, well, we're going to head out. I just want a last little thing. If this episode is not on Spotify or other places, then this will be the last episode that's only exclusively on YouTube. Because for the third episode, I definitely want to be on those other sites. But the turnaround is sometimes a little quick. And I honestly haven't looked into it, so I don't know what the complexity of getting onto something like iTunes or Spotify is. So... But
and you know, if you're reading or if you're listening to this at a later date, I'm sure like we'll retroactively be putting this on a Spotify. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, got everything saved. Just burn everything as soon as it's uploaded. All right.
Stay tuned next time for Protein Part 2.
Part
or whatever else we decide to talk about.
Segueing into slowly making our way to the ugly step cousin alcohol. All right. Goodbye.